Firstly, I want to begin by agreeing with your statement. Students in today's classrooms are becoming increasingly varied in the background and experiences they have in a reflection of today's diverse society. Promoting diversity is a goal shared by most teachers, but achieving this goal in the day-to-day classroom can often be seen as a challenge. Diversity can generally be referred to as multiculturalism. However, within a school context, there are many more to consider, such as gender, disability, religion, and academic ability, which all have a major influence on student learning. Promoting equality and diversity in the classroom is essential for both teachers and their students. As mentioned various times in my teaching philosophy, my aim is to create a classroom environment where all students can thrive together and understand that individual characteristics make people unique and not different in a negative way. This statement closely links with Australian Professional Standards 1 and 4. Being a teacher who values diversity means that I recognise these differences between my students and value these differences as a valued asset to my classroom environment. This means that I will celebrate these diversities and support my students in the following ways. I will build trusting relationships between me and my students, involve parents in their students' learning, and provide opportunities for them to share stories about their cultural differences, values, and beliefs. I will select texts that focus on unique differences and that are gender neutral and free of stereotypes. I will be becoming more informed about the history and the cultural backgrounds of my students other than my own and engage in my own professional learning. I will make sure that learning materials do not discriminate against any of my students and the lessons are adapted where necessary. This might mean wearing an audio tape, printing in a larger font, moving students to the front of the room, or providing access around the classroom, which all closely relate to Standard 1.6. I'll provide explicit teaching and modelling in the way that I want my students to treat each other. I'll convey the same level of respect and confidence in my students' abilities regardless of their diversities, and ensure students have equal access to the curriculum by adapting outcomes and assessment methods to allow students to demonstrate their knowledge and understandings. Demonstration of differentiated instruction can be found in my daybook under Australian Professional Standard 3, Implement and Plan for Effective Teaching and Learning on my ePortfolio. During my time as a pre-service teacher, I have had many experiences working with diversity in the school and classroom context. The first experience I'm going to share with you today is something that I deserved, however, considering the topic of the question, it seemed fitting to share. I had the opportunity of teaching at a primary school whose population was 35% students with English as a second language. 22% of this population were Indian students. Therefore, the school thought to implement a community language program where a retired Indian teacher comes in and teaches the students Punjabi. During my placement, I attended one of these lessons and it was a beautiful sight to see. The Indian students were leading the groups in various classroom activities and the classroom environment was inclusive and respectful of the Indian culture. The second experience that I'm going to share with you today was when on my last placement where a Vietnamese boy arrived 2 weeks before I finished. There was very little planning time for this and we were actually unaware of his arrival. Upon his arrival, I decided to get my students to write a welcome letter for him. They didn't just write this in English, however. I asked them to write it on Google Translate, find out what the translation was in Vietnamese, and write both languages on the welcome letter. Nam was very excited when he saw this, and it was a really great and positive way of welcoming him into the classroom. I also spent time preparing postcards for around the room and taking photos of other school teachers with their names below so he could work out some facial recognition. For a few lunches in a row, I sat down with him and found out what his personal interests were through Google Translate, and not before long found out that he has a very lovely passion for soccer. For the next PDHPE lesson, I programmed soccer as the game, and this was a wonderful way for Nam to feel relaxed with his new peers and confident with something he loves. The other students were quite impressed with his talents and started playing soccer at lunchtime, which is lovely because they could also include his brother Namkar, who also loves soccer. This approach closely links with the standards 4.1 and 4.2. As classrooms become increasingly more diverse, it is important that we acknowledge and address these issues and find ways to celebrate these diversities within the classroom. My goal as a teacher is to create a safe and supportive learning environment where students can create positive relationships based on respect and differences and values are respected.